Every zombie movie you've ever watched lied to you about how fast the world actually dies. Real outbreak models track transmission speed, population density, and infrastructure the same way public health agencies mapped COVID in 2020, and they all point to the same thing. Some cities fall in hours while towns 2 counties over hold out for months. That patchwork is scarier than any overnight blackout because you can't see your own tipping point coming. That's why today I'm breaking down all 8 major myths about zombie outbreaks and what actually happens when the dead start walking. Starting with the myth that convinces you the whole world ends on the same night: instant global collapse. The overnight blackout is the most cinematic lie the genre ever sold you. Every city on Earth going dark in the same 12 hours, every government falling before the coffee gets cold. There, I said it. Now let's earn it. Real collapse is slower, uglier, and way more selective about who it hits first. Outbreak modeling treats geography, population density, and infrastructure as the variables that actually decide who falls and when, which means a virus in a dense city with a shut airport behaves nothing like the same virus in a farming town 3 states over. Spread speed, detection delay, and local response capacity stacked together into a timeline, not a light switch. Look at the actual bottlenecks researchers point to. Warning time, evacuation logistics. Supply routes for food and fuel start buckling within days as delivery drivers stop showing up and warehouses lose staff long before a single truck actually goes missing. Coordination between hospitals, police, and local government erodes in stages. One overwhelmed 911 line and one empty shift at a time. None of that requires the entire planet to fail on cue. What you get instead is a patchwork, which one city collapses in a night because it's packed onto an island with 3 bridges. A rural county 40 miles away is still running its diner a full week later, mostly unaware anything is wrong. What the zombie scenario actually exposes is how uneven a real crisis gets. Block by block instead of planet by planet. That patchwork is scarier than the blackout ever was. A single dramatic collapse at least tells you where you stand. Uneven collapse means the danger is arriving on a private schedule, and your street might simply be behind schedule instead of safe. Many zombie films still lean on the overnight version for their opening 10 minutes, trading a messy true timeline for one clean day zero. Nothing in the research confirms why the shortcut is so popular, but one likely reason is that a slow regional cascade is just harder to storyboard than a montage of falling capitals. It reads great on a poster. It fails the second you're the guy 3 counties out who assumed he had another month. Somewhere in that gap between everyone's gone and nobody's gone yet, something has to be absorbing the early blow, holding a line while the patchwork spreads. A familiar disaster movie beat treats that thing as a punchline in Act 1, right before it turns out to be the only structure still standing when the rest of the map goes quiet. The useless military, so many zombie movies stage the same funeral scene for the army. Tanks roll in, gunships circle, some general barks orders into a radio, and by the next scene, the base is a smoking crater with one survivor crawling out of the wreckage. It plays like a documented military failure. It is a plot requirement wearing a uniform, and the fiction needs that uniform empty fast. Real disaster planning treats the opening days of a mass outbreak as the most survivable stretch of the whole event, not the least. Emergency response frameworks built for pandemics and biological threats assume organized evacuation routes, stockpiled supplies, and structured shelter zones, the exact infrastructure that requires functioning chains of command to run. Take that infrastructure away in Act 1 and you have not proven the military is useless. You have just deleted the force best equipped to buy everyone else time. That is the actual job description. Trained institutions do not need to defeat the outbreak to matter. A perimeter around a city, a checkpoint on a bridge, a triage tent sorting the injured from the infected, none of that ends the crisis. And all of it slows the math working against you. Outbreak modeling treats the entire problem as surveillance and intervention, spotting where the threat is moving and cutting it off before it spreads, which happens to be the 2 things militaries and emergency services train for constantly. Whether a collapse stays contained to one city or swallows a continent usually comes down to how fast that response mobilizes, not how many rounds a soldier can fire into a skull. Compare that to the genre's real anxiety, the one buried under the tank explosions. If a disciplined chain of command holds for even a week, your hero never has to become a hero. Somebody with a radio and a supply line solves the problem before the lone survivor ever picks up a crowbar. A working chain of command would end the movie early, and that is the story's real motive for killing the institution off in Act 1. Watch how fast that empty general's chair gets filled by one guy improvising. The same improvisation this genre keeps selling you is the whole survival plan. The tragedy sitting underneath this is the person watching from a couch, absorbing that lesson as a rulebook. They learn that organized help evaporates on day 1, so why bother waiting on it? That single shortcut convinces someone that a truck full of strangers with a plan is worth less than a machete and a grudge, and that math gets people killed long before anything with teeth shows up. But every containment plan, real or fictional, rests on one assumption that almost nobody in the crowd stops to check: that you can actually tell who is infected and how. how. Pull on that thread, and the cleanest rule in the entire genre starts coming apart in your hands. The biting transmission, one bite. That is the rule most zombie movies sell their audience, and it is the cleanest lie in the genre. You know the rule instantly, because you were taught it before you ever saw a corpse move. Teeth break skin, the clock starts, somebody gets a sad, meaningful look on their face, and 30 minutes later they turn. It is tidy. It is fair. Biology anywhere else in the animal kingdom operates on messier terms, and that gap is the whole problem. Zombie epidemiology research treats the bite as one transmission path among several, a single option on a longer menu rather than the tidy rule the genre often defaults to. Reviews of zombie fiction catalog insect vectors, animal bites, contaminated tissue entering the body through open cuts, and outbreaks where every corpse reanimates at death regardless of contact with anything infected at all. One infection model built to study fictional plagues describes transmission through contaminated tissue meeting broken skin, and even through transplantation, meaning a blood transfusion or an organ donor could carry the same fate as a bite to the neck. Real pathogens spread through blood, through mucous membranes, through open wounds, through mosquitoes, through the air itself, using whichever door happens to be unlocked that day. A single exclusive delivery method is far from universal in nature, so picture the actual mechanics your favorite Outbreak movie skipped entirely. A scratch counts, a splash of contaminated fluid into your eye counts, helping a wounded neighbor with a cut on his own hand counts. The perimeter fences from the containment operations you already watched fail assumed a screenable signal. One wound, one bite mark, something a soldier could clock at a gate with a flashlight. Messy transmission erases that checkpoint entirely, because the infected can now look like anyone who just had a rough week at work. That is worse than it sounds for the guy standing at the fence with a clipboard, and worse still for the viewer at home who spent his weekends memorizing zombie movies like they were survival manuals. He learned to watch for the bite mark on the forearm. Nobody taught him to worry about the man with a bandaged hand who swears it was just a kitchen accident. Promise. Here is a theory worth taking seriously. The one bite rule likely survives in fiction less because of biology and more because of pacing. In theory, it offers writers a clean on-off switch for character death, a single moment the audience can point to and say that's when he was gone. Real transmission, with its blood and its wounds and its ambiguous scratches, would wreck that clarity completely. A plague with no clean line means the audience may not know who to grieve for yet, and grief often needs a timestamp to land, and once you accept the infected are harder to identify than the rules promise, a second assumption cracks open right behind it. The belief that the thing chasing you stays a durable, dependable threat forever, because the body carrying that infection is still subject to a process no monster gets to skip, immune to decomposition. A zombie's body starts dying again the second it starts walking. The tireless, relentless monster chasing you through 2 hours of runtime is already spoiling in real time, and the clock on it started before it ever took a single step. The horde reads as eternal on screen. Every cell inside it is running on a countdown the plot usually ignores. Real death is loud, chemically speaking. Microbes inside the gut start feeding on tissue within hours of the heart stopping. Enzymes released from the body's own cells begin breaking down proteins almost immediately, a process that starts from the inside regardless of what's controlling the limbs. Oxygen exposure accelerates the process further. Insects arrive on a schedule measured in minutes outdoors, drawn in fast and working faster. Temperature and moisture decide whether the whole timeline runs in days or drags out to weeks, setting the pace while biology writes the outcome. A virus, a parasite, or a mystery pathogen can seize the nervous system all at once. The platform carrying that payload is dissolving underneath it on a schedule biology already wrote, one system offering the command and the other one quietly refusing to keep receiving it. Muscle tissue softens and separates from bone. Connective tissue loses the tension that lets a joint bend the same way twice. Eyes cloud and collapse within days outside of refrigeration. A zombie sprinting through a shopping mall in month 3 of an outbreak needs a biological pathway for functioning knees and a working jaw, and there isn't one on record. Fiction likes to point at frozen ground and call it proof that a body can last forever. Permafrost does preserve tissue remarkably well, but that's a freezer doing a freezer's job. External preservation running the whole show, while the myth of an undead immune system takes the credit for somebody else's refrigeration unit. Strip that excuse away and the horde stops looking like an army and starts looking like a chemistry experiment on a deadline. A genre that needs its monster to last an entire trilogy has to skip the part where the monster's own tendons give out. So the camera cuts away, the timeline stays vague, and most of the audience never stops to ask why the thing that ate someone's neighbor in episode 1 still has working elbows in episode 9. Picture the guy who watched every Outbreak movie twice, convinced the real danger is a horde that never quits, never rests, never rots. He stocks a crossbow and skips the water filter, sold on an enemy with unlimited runway. Decomposition was quietly working for him from the opening scene. He never clocked it, the same way he never clocked that the neighbor 2 doors down would end up scarier than anything already dead. The horde reads as the monster with no expiration date. It has one anyway, stitched morphed into its own tissue, ticking from minute 1, running down while most scripts ignore it. So if decay is already working against the enemy before you ever raise a weapon, the danger shifts to the moment you actually have to end one, up close, under pressure, with seconds to get it right. And the genre's favorite solution for that exact moment turns out to be the flimsiest promise it makes: the easy headshot. The genre standard has trained you to trust one move, and that move is one of the least reliable tips in the genre. Aim for the head. It sounds like a rule. It functions like a coin flip because the skull is a small, curved, constantly moving target, and the brain sits behind bone thick enough to deflect rounds that would be far more likely to stop a person with a center mass hit. The films treat the head like an off switch wired directly to the surface. In reality, it is armored, mobile, and attached to a neck that will not hold still. And even though the head itself runs closer to the size of a small melon, the brain doing the actual work inside it is roughly grapefruit-sized and buried off-center. That gap between fantasy and physics gets worse the moment fear enters the equation. Trained shooters in real encounters miss far more often than they hit, and that's against living suspects who feel pain, not a threat that keeps coming regardless. Now take that same shooter, strip out the training, hand them a panicking amateur's grip, and put the target on a staggering, unpredictable gate instead of a paper backdrop. The math that actually decides the outcome is timing. A headshot only works if you land it before the threat closes the distance between you, and distance disappears faster than people tend to expect. 20 feet closes in roughly 4 seconds at a steady walk, and that is the entire window fiction skips over when the hero calmly lines up a shot from 10 yards with the soundtrack cue telling you it's about to land. Miss, and the cost stacks fast. A burned round, a burned half second or more of recovery time, and your exact position advertised to everything else in earshot, while the original problem is still walking toward you with fresh momentum. A grazed skull or a jaw shot does not stop a threat that was never relying on pain response to keep moving. It just adds a wounded, closer version of the same problem. One likely reason the rule survives in fiction is that it gives the hero a repeatable win condition, a clean 2-second solution the plot can cash in whenever the pacing needs a kill. Stack that against everything the genre already got wrong about how the dead actually fail, rot, and stagger, and the headshot starts looking less like survival wisdom and more like the same shortcut wearing a new costume. The person who memorized this as their entire plan walked in with 1 skill and 0 backup, betting a fight on a shot professionals miss under easier conditions than a real outbreak would ever offer. So the shot is unreliable, the timing is brutal, and the miss costs you more than the threat did. That's the moment desperation starts looking for an upgrade, something that doesn't need aim at all, something that promises raw force, can fix what precision couldn't, and reaching for it turns out to be the worst decision on the entire list. The chainsaw weapon. Picture the loudest, heaviest, most fuel-hungry object you could possibly strap to your hands during a crisis. Now imagine reaching for it first. That's the chainsaw. 2-stroke engine, 5 to 15 pounds depending on the model, and a bar that needs a fresh chain, bar oil, and a full gas tank just to keep spinning. Every single one of those requirements has to be met in a world where gas stations stopped pumping weeks ago. The movies sell it as the ultimate finisher, the weapon that turns one survivor into a one-person demolition crew. Real close-quarters combat says the opposite. A blade that size needs swinging room, and swinging room is exactly what a hallway, a stairwell, or a crowded street refuses to give you. Get too close and kickback sends the chain right back toward your own arms. Then there's the sound. A running chainsaw sits around 110 decibels, loud enough to be heard from well over a mile away in open terrain. Remember the wasted shot from the pistol miss, the one that pulled every nearby walker toward the noise instead of the target. A chainsaw doesn't waste one shot. It broadcasts continuously, the entire time it's running, converting every kill into a homing beacon for anything within earshot. Fatigue finishes the job the noise started. Holding 15 pounds of vibrating machinery at chest height for even 2 or 3 minutes wrecks your grip and your shoulders, and a fight that drags past that window leaves you slower exactly when speed matters most. Add a jammed chain or an empty tank mid-swing and the weapon stops being a weapon at all. It becomes 40 pounds of dead weight you're still carrying because you can't bring yourself to drop the fantasy. The standard disaster planning checklists don't include blades. They call for water ration to roughly a gallon a day, a fuel reserve for the vehicle, and a retreat route mapped before anything goes wrong. That's the core of the kit, and notice what isn't in it: mobility and supply beat spectacle. And that's how survival planners consistently write it down. Somewhere out there is a person who watched every one of these films like a checklist, who packed confidence instead of a water filter, who reached for the loudest tool in the shed because the screen told them loud meant safe. The gap between those two instincts is where people actually get hurt. Pop culture keeps the chainsaw around because it looks incredible in a 2-hour runtime. Survival-minded viewers who actually think through the logistics tend to place it near the bottom of any serious kit, alongside anything else else that trades fuel and quiet for a few seconds of spectacle. So if the real enemy is running out of fuel, noise, and energy, then survival was always a logistics problem. And that points straight at the one building so many movie survivors sprint toward first, the place that looks like a stocked fortress and behaves like a trap: the grocery store safe house. Everyone in your survival group already knows where they're running on day one. Same building, same aisle 7. The grocery store looks like the single greatest stroke of luck in the apocalypse. A building somebody else stocked, organized, and labeled for you in advance. That instinct is the same instinct a huge number of terrified people within miles of the store are having at the same second. Picture the parking lot at hour 0. 200 cars arrive within 20 minutes, all aiming for the same set of doors, many of them carrying people who watch the same movies you did and reach the same conclusion. The grocery store stops being a resource the moment it becomes a destination, because a destination with one address and finite shelves turns into a choke point the instant more than a few dozen people share the idea. Real disaster planning treats this exact scenario as the reason to never need the store during the immediate crisis. The 72-hour rule is built around how long emergency response can actually take to reach you, and that window happens to line up with roughly how long it takes stores and delivery trucks to stop being reliable. Emergency guidance tells you to build water, food, and fuel reserves in your own home weeks or months ahead of time, on the assumption that the shelves you're picturing as backup will already be empty, fought over, or physically unreachable by the time you need them. Look at the building itself, tactically. Floor-to-ceiling glass across the entire front. Multiple entrances designed for maximum customer flow, which is a polite way of saying maximum ways in for a crowd with nowhere else to go. Aisles built for browsing, not defense. Wide enough for a shopping cart and completely useless for holding a line. A hardware store panic room from a movie script has better bones than the building a lot of people mentally flag as their fortress. The honest version of this plan looks almost boring next to the fantasy. You get there early, you grab water and calories fast, and you leave before the parking lot fills because the store only pays off as a quick cash rate, not a place to live. The moment it becomes crowded, the shelves stop mattering and the exits do. This is the same shift the last few sections kept pointing toward, the one where the corpse count quietly stops being the scary part of the math. The grenade launcher fantasy and the field hospital fantasy both assumed the fight was against the dead. Here, in the one location countless viewers already believe they've solved, the actual threat is a few hundred other frightened people converging on a single glass box with the exact same idea you had. Somewhere in that crowd is the person from every version of this story who studied the wrong lessons, the one who packed confidence instead of water and is now trusting a building full of strangers to hold. And the moment you admit the biggest crowd at that door is other frightened people, the last myth standing is the one the genre relies on most, the comforting lie about what those people were always going to become. So you never have to ask what actually turns a neighbor into a threat. Humans turn evil. The scariest person in a real outbreak is standing next to you in a grocery store line, and for the first 3 weeks, that person is your best chance of making it out alive. Every movie in this genre needs somebody to snap fast, because a shotgun-toting neighbor by hour 6 makes for a better trailer than a guy quietly rationing canned soup. Real disaster research tells a slower, stranger story. Hurricanes, blackouts, pandemics, earthquakes, the pattern repeats, people organize. Strangers pull each other out of wreckage. Neighbors pool generators, share water, split watch shifts, all without a script or a chain of command. Fear shows up too, and so does selfishness. But they arrive mixed in with cooperation, not instead of it. Zombie outbreak planning documents built by public health researchers assume this exact behavior. Evacuation models, shelter protocols, and supply chain contingency plans are overwhelmingly written on the premise that people can still take orders. Hold a post and look out for the person next to them under extreme stress. That is the entire structure that quietly echoes what planners have built around for decades. Coordination, not chaos, is the baseline. Trust does not vanish the moment the first infected body hits the pavement. It erodes, unevenly, the way it eroded across the messy timelines from the outbreak's early spread, the way it strained through the same rationed hours that made every improvised tool in that garage matter more than the fictional chainsaw ever did. A rationed 40-pack case of water might stretch a family 4 days at survival-level intake, but a smaller case runs out far sooner. Somewhere around the end of the first week, with the taps dry and the shelves stripped, the math turns ugly. Exactly, and that is when the strain that can eventually push decent people into indecent choices begins to build. That gap between instant and gradual is where the genre lies to you the hardest. A 5-minute villain reveal is easy to shoot and easy to sell. 72 hours of a good man rationing water for his kids while his neighbor's kids go without has no jump scare in it, so the camera skips straight to the moment he points a gun at the door. Fiction keeps the ending and cuts the descent because the descent is slow, human, and unbearably sad to actually sit with. That is the whole shortcut this video has been chasing from the opening minute. The bites were survivable, the infected were slow and temporary, the fight scenes were fantasy, and underneath every one of those myths sat the same quiet, unglamorous truth. The person beside you decides whether you live. The dead were always the easy part. What kills you is fear and scarcity, grinding a good neighbor into a threat over weeks. And hardly any film sells the one survival rule that actually holds. The person next to you is your best resource, right up until the day the water runs out. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.